All right, the independent writing is where you are going to really show how much vocabulary and grammar you can compress into a very short amount of writing. So you got to do it in a very organized way to get a high score. Basically, all that you're doing is showing Johan how impressive your English is and how fantastic you can put together an argumentation. And what you need to do is two basic things. First, you have to answer the question in the way that they want you to, which is a minor point, but it's very important. Sometimes people change the subject a little bit, but you should not do that. Always answer the question very directly. And then you need to just show Johan how fantastic your English is. And you're going to do this by following a very strict sequence. And it's got several steps to it. The first one is to plan. You will always make a plan 100% of the time, always. Then the writing phase, obviously. And finally, you'll rewrite one section that you're really not happy with. So what is the plan? Basically, it's a piece of paper where you're going to put down your ideas that are basically a map of the sequence that you want to follow to do the independent writing. So for that reason, you don't really need full sentences. You don't need to have complicated vocabulary, just enough information to remember particular ideas. This is what it looks like. First, you're going to draw physically on your piece of paper a box. And it's got a couple ideas to remember your intro. Then you're going to have the points that support the position in the intro with your first body paragraph, and you'll support the reason why you chose that specific point with some additional support. And then in the second one, I often recommend that you do a negative point, which is basically telling me why the people on the other side of the argument are completely incorrect. And finally, you're going to do a very simple conclusion. I'm going to show you a little example of an actual plan. So pay attention to the way that this is constructed, even drawn on the paper, and then we'll continue. Okay, when I'm thinking about how to answer this question, I'm always thinking about what's the best position to take, not what is my real opinion. Here, I think that it's a much easier position to argue that starting a business is better than buying a house. Okay, in my first reason, I'm going to say that businesses are better because they allow you to earn more money, which then lets you buy a house. And I'll use an example of a friend of mine that started a laundry business and then with that money was able to buy a house. Now, I really want to add an academic sounding piece of information at the end. So what I'll say is that this money allowed him to achieve a higher economic contribution because he was able to earn more money with the business. Here, my second example is going to be actually a negative example. What I'm going to say is that people that buy houses are taking a big risk. For example, in 2008, a lot of the economic crisis was caused by people not being able to sell their houses, which was a huge problem. And if those people had started a business and not bought a house, many of them wouldn't be in such a bad position. And then I can add some more analysis about how that affected the economy to make it more academic sounding. Okay, so now that you have your plan completed, what you're going to do is transfer the ideas from your outline to the screen. And this is kind of the most important part of the whole thing. First, what you're going to do is write your intro. And it should be simple. I need a very strong thesis or opinion statement in it. And then you may want to add a sentence in the beginning for context. So it'll look something like this. You'll see that the different colors correspond to the different components. And I'm using the example that we used before. Once you have an introduction like this, then you're going to move on to your body paragraphs. Your body paragraphs are where you are going to get the highest portion of your score in this item. So it's very important that these body paragraphs are the most developed and best items or best sections of your composition. And what they need to do is provide points that support your thesis, and then you need to support those ideas and give examples and try to sound academic, particularly at the end of these paragraphs. And also, this is where you're really going to use more complicated grammar and more unusual vocabulary to move your score up. Here's an example. So again, we have the colors that correspond to the different sections. And in the top right, this is what I made in the plan in the little example. So what I'm doing is just transferring directly these ideas to the screen where I'm typing. Finally, you're going to do your conclusion. Remember, you have 2 body paragraphs. I only showed you 1, but you will do 2. Then you do the conclusion. I want the conclusion to be short and simple, and you don't want to be adding much information here or doing much analysis here, because this is the section where you don't want to have to spend much time on constructing it, because it's the end of the writing phase, and if you have any sort of time problems, it'll probably affect the conclusion. So your conclusions should be a low-risk portion of your composition. Here's an example that might even be more complicated than is necessary, but it's something that you can think about. Finally, many people, what they like to do is rewrite one section. You generally know intuitively if there's one section that you did not do such a great job on. So if you have 5 minutes or 6 minutes, you can go back and just rewrite that whole section, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. The only thing is you have to be very careful with time if you do that, because sometimes if you only have 4 minutes, it's not enough time to do a good rewrite, so you may need to skip that step. Finally, you're finished. Celebrate. You can rest a little bit and get ready to go home, because you've just finished the TOEFL exam.